All right. Good evening, everyone. We will be reconvening the City of Tigard Budget Committee. For those of you joining virtually, please remember to turn on your mic when speaking and mute your mic after you are finished. I may go around and ask each of you if you have any questions or comments prior to concluding each section of the agenda. The team will be capturing all of our comments, questions, and requests for follow-up information if necessary. Public comment has been scheduled for 6:15 p.m. Please make sure that you have signed in to be called upon. Please keep comments to 2 minutes. The deadline for written testimony and registration for video testimony was by noon on Monday, May 20th. At Budget Committee meetings, we will be following the same public comment protocol as at City Council meetings. We will not have any scheduled breaks during the meeting. However, if you need to step away, please feel free to do so. If you are a voting committee member attending virtually, please note in the chat when you are stepping away and when you return. If you are unable to connect to the meeting or have any technical difficulties related to the Budget Committee meeting, please call 971-464-1476. That number again is 971-464-1476. This is call-in only. Texting will not work. All right, the joint meeting of the City of Tigard Budget Committee and the Town Center Development Agency Budget Committee is now reconvened. Tonight's goal is to make monetary decisions regarding the City of Tigard fiscal year 2024-2025 proposed budget and the Town Center Development Agency, or TCDA, proposed budget for fiscal year 2024-2025. Let's start by asking Committee Secretary Kelly Pement to conduct our roll call.
Clarissa Benfield.
Here.
Scott Duddy. Councillor Hu.
Here.
Mayor Lube.
Here.
I'm here. Jake Schlack.
Here.
Councillor Shaw.
Here.
Youth Councillor Vogel.
Here.
Leah Voigt.
Here.
Councillor Wolf.
Here.
Awesome, thank you. There is a quorum present. I'd like to also just acknowledge that one of our community members, Aaron McCool, is joining us at the table today. He has been considered for the Budget Committee alternate position that's currently vacant. And I may recognize him to make comment if he's interested or ask any questions as such. Thank you for being here, Aaron, and your interest in serving on the Budget Committee. Before we get into approving meeting minutes, I just want to acknowledge that today is the meeting where we really get down to business in terms of approving the budget, property tax rates, and so on. So that's what we'll be looking at today for the agenda. We will have some time for public comment, for follow-up items, and then we'll really be getting into having presentations about what we are being asked to consider to approve, opportunities to discuss any of it, and then ultimately considering motions to approve the budget and other relevant items. Just wanted to have that explained before we go away from this slide. The next item on the agenda is to approve meeting minutes from the May 14th meeting. Copies of those meeting minutes have been provided to the committee electronically in advance of the meeting. Are there any additions or changes to the summary minutes? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve them as written.
I move to approve the minutes for the May 14th Budget Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Lube. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilor Shaw seconds. Is there any further discussion? All right, if there's no further discussion, I will be conducting a roll call vote. If you are in favor of approving the summary minutes as written, please say yes. If opposed, please say no. Clarissa Benfield?
Yes.
Scott Duddy? Councilor Hu?
Yes.
Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Kelly Pement?
Yes.
I'm voting yes. Councilor Shaw?
Yes.
Leah Voigt?
Yes.
Councilor Wolf?
Yes.
All right, the meeting minutes are approved unanimously. The next agenda item is to receive public comment. At Budget Committee meetings, we follow the same public comment protocol as at City Council meetings, and this can be seen on the slides that we are currently displaying. Next slide. It's all good. So, yeah, we'll go through all of them. Kalina Plath from the Finance Department has collected the written testimony that has come to the city. Kalina, is there any public testimony ahead of this meeting?
There is not.
Thank you. Network Administrator, is there any call-in or video testimony today?
Chair, there are no callers in the queue and no requests for video testimony.
All right. And from what I can see, there is no one here for in-person public comment. I will say that while this is maybe the final opportunity for public comment to be accepted by the Budget Committee before it considers approval of the budget, there is still opportunity to make public comment during the budget process. There will be a public hearing in the month of June where the City Council considers formal adoption of the budget, and public comment can be given ahead of that meeting as well. So I will put that on the record. Since there is no public comment, we will move to May 14th Budget Committee follow-up items, and Finance Director Eric Kang will start off the conversation. Eric.
Thank you, Chair. So in our meeting agenda, we've posted Q&A for follow-up from our last meeting on May 14th. The Q&A captures questions that we were asked during the meeting, and then also any questions that were asked after, and then discussion items during the meeting. And so with that, we have one discussion item to follow up on today, and I will pass it over to City Manager Steve Reimer.
Still trying. There we go. Clicker's a little slow. Well, good evening, everyone, members of the Budget Committee, the council that's here, teammates and community members. The main follow-up, as Eric said, was from the conversation around compensating our youth counselor and having a conversation around that. As all you may recall, as part of the conversation, we talked about a couple ways of being able to compensate the youth counselor. One is through becoming a city employee, a part-time employee, if you will. The other is through a stipend. A key thing to all those are really understanding and being mindful of what BOLI, or the Bureau of Labor and Industry, or FLSA from the federal level say about being either from a stipend standpoint or being a public employee. Just a few things from an employee standpoint that we want to bring to your attention. Some was already discussed. Just things, once again, to be mindful of. Doesn't mean they can't be overcome, but things that we have to pay attention to. If we're going to bring on another employee, would be some of the supervisory responsibilities of the youth counselor, looking at time and attendance or tracking when the individual is working. There are a lot of break requirements, as you may know, by law, and when you're youth, they're even more stringent, and so just being mindful of that. I believe even in BOLI, as I looked on it, it's what we get once we get to like the 2-hour level. There is some break requirements required, so understanding that. Some age requirements as well, so we'd be recommending a mini event 16 plus. And I think that hasn't been an issue to date, but just be aware of that. The training requirements that go along with being a city employee, we have to ensure that all those are met as well. And then just looking at technology access and some things that already are provided, but making sure that, especially from a time and attendance standpoint, that the youth counselor would have access to our systems, which would be something that we could figure out. From a stipend standpoint, the key thing there is it's supposed to be de minimis, and it's really defined as being no more than 20% of the regular wage, and so trying to understand that as well. A few things that we have discussed, that we've talked to the youth counselor. Thank you, Youth Counselor Vogel, for sharing your thoughts on the time that she thinks she's been spending. And it's in the neighborhood, give plus or minus, it just depends, about 15 hours a week when you look at council preparation, council meetings, things associated with being a youth counselor. As you recall, last time I think Mayor Lube indicated liaison to our Youth Advisory Council, so those times, as well as events that that the youth counselor attends. And this last week I think is probably a good example, maybe on the higher side, but if you think of last week, we had the state of our city that the youth counselor was at. She also did some prep work in filming one of the videos. And then we had budget committee the next day, right? Yeah, next day was the budget committee, which was a week ago today. And then I'm not sure what happened on Wednesday and Thursday, but then Friday we had our grand opening of Cook Family Park and our inclusionary playground. So just a snapshot of 1 week of what a youth counselor did. I know other weeks may be lower. And then there's also a time when a youth counselor, along with a couple other youth counselors and one of our teammates, attend the National League of Cities in Washington, D.C. for a multiple day period as well. That would count towards some of the hours. So appreciate it again, youth counselor, for sharing that. That helps us. Ultimately, this will be the city council's decision, and we'll bring something forward to them in the near future, though I think what I heard last week was looking for some of the insights from the budget committee in regards to questions you have or ideas or thoughts, or obviously the council as a whole as well. So those are my introductory remarks. Happy to answer any questions you may have. I'll turn it back to you, Chair, and then we can go from there.
Thank you, City Manager Reimer, for an explanation of the options that you all have been looking at and clarifying that ultimately this is a council decision as far as which route is taken. That said, I'd love to give an opportunity for members of the committee to ask any questions or comments regarding this topic, if there are any. Happy to go down the list in this particular case. We will start with... I'm going to just do the list, yeah. Is there anyone else who wants the thrill of putting their name tag on their side? Okay, it is fun. I will give you that. I'm first based on the rotation, and my question was answered because I just, as chair, have certain procedural questions about this topic and making sure the committee, understanding whose authority it is to approve this and how it impacts the budget approval timeline, which it sounds like it doesn't. Those both have been addressed by your remarks. Councillor Shaw.
I was curious, a lot of times the high schools will provide volunteer hours or college credit, and curious if that had been investigated with TTSD or if that is a benefit, because oftentimes high school students, particularly seniors, need that. So I was curious if Youth Councilor Vogel, maybe you have a thought about that or had researched that and it was not a viable alternative. Thank you.
Yeah, something for me. I mean, this past year's been counting that towards volunteer hours. We don't really, I mean, I'm in National Honor Society, so we don't take like specific like write-ins of volunteer hours. We just assume that if that's happening and, you know, they can see myself on the city website, they assume that I'm attending meetings and putting in the work. And so for me, that's been a really big benefit. I definitely think it is an option. I think that's something definitely to consider because for a lot of people, that's very worth it because that's something that they're looking for. So, I mean, yeah, that would be a really great option. I like that.
Thank you, Councillor Vogel, for the perspectives on that. Councillor Shaw, do you have any other questions or comments in that regard?
I do not.
All right, thank you. All right. We will move on to Youth Councillor Vogel. Do you have any additional questions or comments on this?
Nothing at this time.
Leah Voigt?
I was curious, Councillor Shaw, if you could expand on the college credit part of what you said, because the volunteer hours I'm familiar with, but possibilities of college credit I am not.
Yeah, my understanding is if you pre-apply for a major such as like public policy or something similar, and you are able to perform volunteer hours, that they actually will give you credit. If you write the college a letter and say, I could apply this to my major, that they will advance, quote, advance, or just pre-apply credits. So I know that's been done in a few cases. I was just curious if that had been investigated here.
Thank you for more information about that. I mean, I think the volunteer hours in college credit and resume building are definitely things that are useful to high school students, and it's not the same as financial compensation. And so I'm interested in continuing this exploration of how there could be financial compensation as part of this, in addition to being able to put it on your resume and everything else.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf?
Thank you, Chair. A couple things. The college credit would be interesting. I wonder if that's pretty specific to a particular major, because the dual credit program has a pretty high bar in terms of the process through the schools. So we certainly could learn more about that, but that may be more of a challenge of a fit. What I wondered is, could the city offer a scholarship for funding? And maybe that's putting a mask over what is a stipend, and we're back to, but I'm thinking, is a scholarship something different? It's a model of economic compensation for your time. It would come at the end. It wouldn't be ongoing, but it would be recognizing that somebody contributed their time. If these two models are not ideal for, I appreciate the time that Maddie and Ishiki, did last year in my big 2 years of time. So I recognize the commitment and the opportunity cost of a job. But so anyway, so that was just my idea, wondering about a scholarship, and that just popped in my head. So thanks.
Thank you. Clarissa Benfield?
No real questions from my side. I love the idea of a scholarship too, though. I think that's such a good idea, just as a different kind of exploratory path. Just remind me, when do they have to apply by, and when does the new term, when do they actually have to apply and get selected?
So I think it's here soon, and it's on the budget cycle, so it's July to June. So this would be, we would have to resolve this. Yeah.
Cool. Counselor Hu?
No question, but I would like to see us pursuing compensating youth counselor further, so thank you.
All right, Mayor Lube?
Yeah, thank you. This is something I continue to talk with the city teammates about, and I appreciate that the city would prefer to go the stipend route, and I 1,000% understand why. But when we started to look at initial dollar figures, it almost felt insulting. Like we're patting ourselves kind of on the back for compensating them. That's not actually going to move the needle, and whether or not, this individual, it would make enough of a difference for them to be able to choose this over another job. And so that's kind of my primary concern is, I don't assume that them working here, right, they're going to be the breadwinner for their family and those sorts of things, but maybe it allows them to work less hours at another job or just enough hours to pay for whatever. While I do love the idea of a scholarship, I think that would then make the expectation that going to college is the expected route. And I think we've learned a lot of our community members who may do great here, college may not be their path. And then what's the fair way to compensate them? So that's my concern in that scenario, if they choose to go into, service in a different kind of way, that, the scholarship then they lose out on simply because they don't go that route.
That would also include community college.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I totally, just for anybody who didn't hear, Councilor Werolf acknowledged it would be community college or trades, and I totally understand all of that. I'm just thinking of scenarios in which that may not be their path, and I think over time, our youth are learning that, there was a big push for college and it doesn't fit for everybody. So I don't want that potentially to get in the way of somebody being able to be compensated. So I just appreciate the conversation continuing and appreciate the challenges. I just also want to make sure we're not doing something that we think that we feel good about ourselves and pat ourselves on the back, but it's not actually going to move the needle for those kids who need to work, and then, a small amount of funds come in and it's not enough for them to actually be able to be youth counselor. So that's just my concern with going with the stipend. So.
Thank you. Kelly Pemmon?
No questions. I think my only comment is that I agree that it should be like a compensation as opposed to, scholarship or some other method of payment. Sorry, but that's my only comment.
Cool. Are there any other questions or comments on this topic? Leah Voigt?
Yeah, I was wondering, So City of Tigard has a social services grant funding opportunity. And I know the rules that you have to have a fiscal sponsor and be a nonprofit, and so there are other rules around that. And there are probably conflicts with then having them serve for the city, who has then awarded them the grant. But I was just curious if there were any possibilities, you know, in terms of that part of it or that avenue, and also curious, and these don't need to be answered tonight, in terms of what is the city's gift policy. You know, if we had a Youth Counselor of the Month award and our youth counselor happened to win it every month and get a $100 gift certificate as their prize, you know, like, just what is that? Or, right, I'm sure that we give thank you gifts to volunteers. And I'm sure that there are other limitations around that, but just curious.
I don't want to step on their toes. It's $600 a year, and then you're required federally to report it. $10.99. Yep.
And just to clarify on your, yeah. And just to clarify, your first question was about using funds from the Social Services and Community Events Grant Program potentially as a grant to this individual?
Yeah, either to the individual, or if there were a nonprofit that wanted to sponsor the youth counselor position and apply for grant funding to provide funds to the youth counselor while they are in this position. Just exploring. Again, there are so many rules around that. I see your brain being like, could we do? I'm not saying it will even work. This is a brainstorming moment of like a, let's add it to the pot and see maybe it sparks an idea in someone else that then opens a pathway. I'm not looking for any answers because I know the answer is no.
I apologize that my facial expressions were giving away the strain of thought. No, I listened to your original comment, and I just wanted to follow up and be very clear about what your suggestion was, because I was like, I think this is what she's suggesting. All right, well, definitely things to keep in mind. If there were, proceed sort of budget law question, so if the route were to go the employee bully route that was first mentioned were to be done, would that would obviously change the FTE portion of the program for whichever program that those funds would come out of. Would that adjustment be made as part of a supplemental budget, or as part of the amendments made by the council before adoption that is within their rights as under Oregon law?
So for what's being presented tonight, those figures aren't prepared, but those always can be prepared if the policy decision is made before budget adoption, which is on June 18th, and the council can vote on that as a council-approved change to the final figures.
Cool. Yeah, I imagine it would be within
or
the
it could also be
10%.
added as a supplemental.
Sure.
I believe the law actually states, and not that council would do this, but council can change the budget up to 10% without coming back to the budget committee for it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Lube. Yeah, I'm aware of that rule. I just wanted to. Yeah. No. I thank you for. Oh, sorry. One moment. I just wanted to say thank you for raising that point. That is good for the budget committee to keep in mind. That's why I wanted to understand if that were the policy route that the council were to go, just where would that technically fit into the process? Would it be there? Would it be a supplemental budget, and so on, just so we're all aware of how this is done. Aaron, it sounds like you have a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. Question about if the youth counselor became an employee, at what point would they be eligible for benefits, and how would that impact the amount of the reimbursement?
Yeah, I believe it's 20 hours. I can verify with HR.
And is that 20 hours, it sounds like the youth counselor is working kind of it's up and down. So if they work over 20 hours, is that going to impact, or is it 20 hours over the year, 20 hours per week over the year? How does that work?
I believe it's on average, but I see a chat coming through from our HR director, so I'll,
Okay. I was just,
yeah, it's under 20 hours per week, and I believe it's on average, so.
okay. So as long as they stay under 20 hours, then the per hour would be all that we would have to really worry about. There wouldn't be PERS and health insurance and all of that.
Not PERS and health insurance, but we'll have other, employee costs that are related to it.
Okay. That was just my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any other questions or comments regarding stipend, Counselor Hu?
Not to make this discussion longer, I'm just curious that I believe PGE sponsor our youth counselor or youth group to go to Washington D.C. every year. So I'm just curious how that model works, and how is that not a ethical concern, or I don't need an answer right now, but I'm just curious how that model works. So if we can get a little bit written up on that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Shaw.
No, I don't know the answer. Sorry to set that expectations. I do not know the answer to that. No, I was just wondering if we were going to refer the scholarship question to City Attorney Rahala, and the only reason I mention that is I'd hate for Youth Counselor Vogel or any future youth counselors to have to limit what they do in a week. And if you take last week alone, I'm sure it had to be more than 20 hours, and it could be we have like 4 or 5 really cool months where there's really great events, and we have to tell them, sorry, you can't go. And that seemed to me, that would be tragic. But just a thought.
Yeah, so our city attorney's been closely involved. She's not able to make tonight's meeting. Obviously, we're going to regroup with HR Director Jennifer Curran, myself, take into these comments, continue the conversation. As we said last time, it is much more of a policy conversation than a financial. From a budgetary standpoint, it would be in the council's budget. I believe we probably even have funds that'd be able to cover this for next year at the dollar amounts that we're talking. So it is much more what's the best route to go than concerning about do we have to do budget amendments, et cetera.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I'd like to thank the committee for all of its interest in this particular topic. It sounds like there are several options that the council and the committee are interested in learning more about. Of course, nothing that won't stop us from proceeding with approving certain aspects of the budget tonight, but things definitely to keep track of going into next fiscal year. Eric or City Manager Reimer, Finance Director Kang or City Manager Reimer, are there any other follow-up items from May 14th that we need to cover, or just Youth Counselor?
I don't believe there's any others. I think just for follow-up to this follow-up is, so we'll continue the conversation with City Council, obviously keep the Budget Committee engaged when those conversations are occurring, so you can tune in or join us here. Thanks.
Terrific. Are there any other follow-up items or questions or comments just in general from the committee before we move on to the next item?
I did have one follow-up. We did receive a follow-up question on the TCDA City Center Building Improvement Matching Grant Program. The question was, who gets to set the grant guidelines for the TCDA City Center Building Improvement Matching Grant Program? And the response to that is the program guidelines have been developed by staff with consultation and approval with the Joint TIF Grant Program Committee, which 2 members of the TCDA board and 2 members of the TCAC. And then the board of the TCDA approved the original program guidelines for the facade improvement program back in 2009 and the interior improvement program in 2012 when they were originally established. And the guidelines have been adjusted throughout the years with the approval of the committee, and the joint committee members can ask staff to research changes in the program guidelines for consideration by the committee, and changes to the guidelines that would materially change the intent of the original program would need to be reviewed by both the TCAC and the board. And then there was another part to that question. What other city programs are available to help support existing growing businesses in Tigard? And the other existing businesses in the TIF district are eligible to apply for an exterior improvement grant. There's a citywide Tigard Impact Fund, and other programs are listed on the Economic Development website. And we could follow up with a link on that. And so that was the only follow-up question we received ahead of this meeting. that hasn't already been answered in the Q&A. With that, I would like to open it up for questions on any of the Q&A items that were posted in the meeting agenda.
Are there any questions or comments on any of the additional items? All right. If not, thank you, Finance Director Kang. So we will now be moving to our next agenda item, which is budget consideration for approval. This will have several sections to it. First one being a presentation on budget and technical adjustments. We'll then have a presentation and consider approval of state revenue sharing funds, a presentation and consideration of approval of debt service and property tax rate levies that need to be approved. We'll then have an opportunity to consider approval of the proposed budget with these amendments and the proposed TC. First, that one is the City of Tigard budget, and then the Town Center Development Agency proposed budget after that. I want to be very clear about what the order is because there are a lot of moving parts, and I will be giving opportunities for discussion on each of those. So we will now move on to our next item. So Finance Director Eric Kang and Budget Manager Kalina Plath will be kicking us off with a presentation on technical adjustments proposed on the before the approval of the fiscal year 2025 budget recommendation.
Thank you. And one of the first ones that we have here is for the Community Development Department. We increased the expenditures to the construction excise tax by $750,000, and this was to allow them to take some previously unspent contracts and roll them into this new year. And unfortunately, they were not able to ascertain that amount until after we had prepared the initial proposed. And then on a very similar scope, the $60,000 increase is to spend down a Metro grant, and I believe that came in at a later time as well. So those are the two increases we have for community development. And just also to point out on the CET, that is their primary goal, and this aligns them with what council has approved in the previous years for the amount to get the expenditures out.
Oh, too much. Oh, way too much.
Temperamental clicker.
So before we, while Steve is getting to that slide, there we go. I did want to share that yes, that's the one. We did make a change to the technical adjustment from the material that was submitted ahead of the Budget Committee meeting. So the recommendation for the technical adjustment was reduced down to $24,416. Just to clarify this, in Finance's original proposed budget, there was a $150,000 cut to the budget for professional and contractual services, and this can be found on page 113 for budget unit 2100. And that was with the intent of terminating a contract for an existing program to manage our right-of-way service, right-of-way program, and we had made the decision to bring that back in-house. And currently, this is unsustainable with the amount of growing development and the number of growing customer base, because this program is now residing within our utility billing department. They've also taken on more responsibilities with business license, and so with this recommendation, we'd be converting an existing 0.5 FTE to a 1.0 FTE, and so the cost of that is just roughly $25,000. And yeah, I think that'd be good. And for the purpose of the technical adjustments, I'm happy to take a pause on each one for discussion or answer any questions.
Clarissa Benfield.
Yeah, thanks. So which one does it fall under? Is it under this, professional contractual group on page 113?
Correct. Off the top of my head, it should be roughly, if you look at last year's number, it was about 400,000.
Oh, yeah, the 432.
Yeah, so that was a combination of a reduction in Tyler consulting costs that we are no longer continuing because we went live with Tyler in October. But in addition to that, there was $150,000 for a contract for a consultant for a right-of-way program.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding this change to appropriations or the community development one, since we did not pause there? And I will go down the list at the end of this section as well, so you don't have to feel pressed to ask a question immediately. If not, let's move to the next item.
And this item is in our Tigard Police Department. And this was mentioned in the budget message at the front of your budget, but we did not have all of the details or the full grant information at the time. So we are adding in 1 FTE within the police department for a community service officer. This is technically a zero net effect on your budget because it is fully grant funded. So we've added in the revenue as well as this expenditure. But for the appropriation increase, it is $114,391. And this is a 2-year grant that provides up to $300,000. This is just all we've estimated that we'll need for this next fiscal year.
Clarissa?
Are there any questions or comments regarding this change to appropriations? All right, next change.
And this is within our Public Works Department. It'll be up shortly. But this was the addition of a CIP project. The information was not available at the time we did the proposed budget, but they brought that in. It is only an increase of $15,000, and it's coming from our water funds. And this is a requirement under America's Water and Infrastructure Act. So it is something that does need to come in very quickly, which is why we went ahead and added it now instead of waiting until a supplemental time.
Are there any questions or comments about this change to appropriations? If not, let's move to the next slide.
So these next 2 slides are connected. I'll speak on the first one, which is the one with the chart on Public Works. As you can see, there's a lot of numbers on this chart right here. So I do want to provide a brief explanation about what this change is. So there was an adjustment due to a few technical corrections in our allocation methodology. So the Public Works Engineering Fund is a internal service fund that's used to charge different revenue sources for capital projects, also for some system infrastructure costs. And system infrastructure costs are things where engineers work on some of our major systems that don't have a specific project tied to it. So you can think of it like if they receive a call from a community member about some sort of traffic signal or some sort of street, they have some sort of follow-up work that they have to do. Those aren't specifically tied to a project, but there's significant amount of time being spent on the systems. So the way this fund works is there's projects that are directly charged to specific revenue sources, like the SDC funds, that are restricted revenue sources by statute. And then there are certain other funds that can actually be used to pay for some of these system infrastructure costs that are not directly chargeable to a specific project. So what we're trying to do here with this allocation is capture the time that's not directly attributable to a project, to a capital improvement plan project. And as part of the correction, you'll see that there was a net decrease of about $1.2 million. And that was due to a double charge that happened. That was a technical correction that had to be made. So the total amount that's being charged is about $2.1 million, or that has to be allocated. There was also another significant adjustment to the street maintenance fee. The street maintenance fee is a revenue source, as we've mentioned before, by Tigard Municipal Code, and this fund cannot pay for any capital projects. It can only be used for maintenance, and so this fund actually cannot be used to pay for our engineers. So that was removed as one of the funding sources to pay for this indirect cost. And then the net effect is you'll see that the funding sources that are paying for these indirect costs are the gas tax, the city gas tax, park and recreation fund, and then the enterprise funds. And this is consistent with what you've seen in the past. If you look at prior comparables, these are the traditional or the historical funds that have paid for this indirect cost.
First, I'd like to thank you for the table. It's a lot of numbers, but it's, I think, very informative once I wrapped my head around it. Are there any questions or comments regarding this series of changes? Councillor Shaw?
Just a comment recognizing that this had been an ongoing issue for at least a couple of years, if not longer. So just want to thank Eric, your team, for correcting this, and I'm sure Public Works is pleased. So thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? All right, let's move to the next slide, please.
So again, for this next slide, it is being called out for TCDA because this makes an appropriation change to TCDA. I'll wait just a moment for the slide. Technology didn't want us to end early today. So.
And before we get into it, this is a change to the City of Tigard proposed budget that impacts TCDA, or is this a TCDA budget change?
So this next slide right here is a TCDA specific change.
Okay.
But it is an impact that's a result of the change to the engineering allocations. So, excuse me. In that prior slide, there was a charge that was hitting one of the TCDA funds to pay for a portion of the engineering time, and that has been eliminated in this new technical adjustment. So there will be no engineering charges directly to the TCDA.
Are there any questions or comments about this? All right, next slide.
And this next slide is going to talk about transfers, and there it is. So the first one here is a transfer in. We had the transfer out entered, and I will take full responsibility, new system, and I didn't get the transfer in on the opposite side. And so when I was running the funds, we noticed that looked a little short. So it was $298,000, or $298,507. That is to correct the opposite side. So it came out of the pandemic relief fund and needed to go into the general fund. So that's where that one comes from. The next one here is our transient lodging tax, and we're eligible to take up to 30% of that each year and transfer that to the general fund. We did the estimate for fiscal year 25, and then we also went back and did a true up of previous years, which actually accounted to some years it was a little over, some years it was a little under, so that's where we're coming in with a total of $188,931. And then we will be looking at this each year as we close the other year to make sure that we're only getting the amount that we're supposed to, or increasing it to get the amount we're allowed.
One question from my side. Would you be able to explain the 30% limit that you mentioned? And is that because of the fund that we have created, or is that like a state law that's related to the use of TLT funds?
So the 30% limit is within state statute, that only 30% can be used towards supporting existing operations.
Okay, so that's separate. I remember TLT funds coming up with social service and community event grants, and there were a lot of restrictions around it. So this is just 30% that's being used for general operations and doesn't have that restriction on it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, next slide, please.
Thanks, Victor.
And these are also additional transfers. And this is the street maintenance fund into gas tax. And these were transfers that we received after we prepared the proposed budget. So $150,000 is an annual amount to support the right-of-way maintenance, $42,500 to support dig-outs for the maintenance crew, and then the additional general fund into our Parks and Recreation Utility Fund. When we made the adjustments to the ICAP, we were then short in that fund, and so we needed to increase the transfer that was being made to support that fund by $500,000.
One additional comment I'll make on the transfers from the street maintenance into gas tax. These are transfers that are recurring, that have happened year over year, and they are eligible expenses out of the street maintenance fund to pay for our operations, which are paid out of our gas tax fund.
Are there any questions or comments about these transfers? Leah Voigt?
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the update or the correction that was made, technical adjustment that was made about the public works engineer position and funding. When the correction, when Kalina Plath was talking about the 30% for the TLT fund, she also explained the process for going forwards, how that would be monitored and tracked to make sure that it stayed on track. And I was curious for the adjustment with the Public Works Engineering Fund. Councillor Shaw had mentioned that it had been going on for several years, and so congratulations and thank you for catching that. I know when those things are embedded, it can be a challenge. And so I was curious, because funds had previously been spent in maybe not the way they were intended to, kind of what's the process look like in terms of recourse of correcting that? And this one seems maybe like just doing this fix then puts it on the right track to continue correctly going forwards, but I was just hoping you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so one thing that's important to share about how indirect charges work. So indirect charges are always based on estimates, on what your budget, what your estimated budget is. And so some years, well, we would expect everyone to stay within their budget, of course. But if you have significant savings in your budget, that all falls into the fund balance of that internal service fund. And so over the past couple years, there have been different approaches. Some of them is to let that fund balance accumulate and spend for future central service budgets. And then, sorry. The other methodology is to okay, all better now. Just had to get a cough out. The other method is to true it up in the following year when you make a proposal for the indirect charge and reduce that by your savings. And so if you have some of that in your fund balance, that would reduce your future charge for indirect charges, if that makes sense.
Does that also account for the source of the money, for example, perfect, thank you.
I can add to it while Eric catches his breath there. But part of that, it's not that there was an error in how it was done. As we talked about last year, our indirect cost allocation is a very large, complex, overly complex system. And so what we did this year, and Eric spearheaded that, did kind of a simplification of that, going through looking at how are we doing this, how do we do it a little easier, a little more correct, instead of, you know, this continuous, very, very arduous, needed a full FTE to be able to track it process. And in going through that, we calculated some, we got a little more information, a couple adjustments made. And so that's really what you're seeing here is we did that first round, got a little more discussionary in, and then came back and made a couple more adjustments. So it's not that in previous years it was not done correctly or the amounts were off. There were true-ups being done within the accounting operations department. It's just a new process. And with that new process, little bumps in the road in the implementation of it and a couple changes.
Yeah, so in the future, the intent is to, any sort of fund balance that's accumulated that's over our minimum reserve would offset any future charges to the different funds. So we would see if there are savings that are much more significant, then the different funds that pay into the internal service funds would see a reduction in their charges.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Based on my copy of the slide deck, that is the last of our technical adjustments, and we're going to get a summary of how this looks at the program level. And so, sorry, I'm debating whether to go down the list or, yeah, we'll go down the list before we get into the overall appropriation changes. Councilor Shaw?
No additional questions. Thank you, Chair.
Youth Councilor Vogel?
Also, no questions. Thank you.
Leah Voigt?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Councilor Wolf?
No questions.
Clarissa Benfield?
No questions, thank you.
Councilor Hu?
No question, thank you.
Mayor Lube?
No questions.
Kelly Pement?
No questions.
And I'll make it unanimous. I also have no questions at this time. Definitely want to give everybody ample time to make questions or comments before we consider approval of the budget. All right, the next slide, based on my printout, like I said, it looks like overall budget committee changes for each of our programs. So let's have an overview of that.
So, and just as Jake said, this is just a detail. Went to the all funds area of what you see in your schedule of appropriations at the back of your book. So it's not every single fund, but it is the all funds, basically where each of those changes came in. So you saw the detail there, but I wanted you to see overall what your schedule of appropriations looks like.
And that is page 449 for everyone with their budget binders. All right. Cool. Next slide.
Yeah, and then the next slide, this is the same thing, but for the TCDA. And it's there again showing you just the changes and where it went back and forth.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, next slide, please.
This is an overview of the FTE changes. There was a request to move a position that we had previously shown in fleet over to facilities. It does not make any funding change. They're out the same out the same funds, but we did just want you to know that when you look from this proposed to the adopted, there will be that FTE change moving it from one division to the other. There is the half FTE in finance that Eric spoke about earlier today. And then there is the one FTE in the police department that I spoke about. That was the grant funded position. So it would move our FTE count from 358.3 to 359.8.
All right. Are there any questions or comments about those summary level changes to the proposed budgets for the City of Tigard and TCDA? All right. Well, that concludes the presentation on the proposed adjustments for those budgets. We will now open a public hearing, or the public hearing, I should say, on the state revenue sharing. State law requires the city must hold a public hearing to receive state revenue sharing. And Finance Director Eric Kang will be leading us through state revenue sharing.
Yeah, so, Chair Jake, as you mentioned, we're required to hold a public hearing on state revenue sharing. Next slide, please. So we're forecasting for our state revenue sharing to be a total of $825,500 in the general fund for the fiscal year 2024-2025. And that's essentially everything.
And this apportionment of state revenue sharing funds, is that based on like population of different municipalities and special districts and others who receive these funds?
Yes, so the state revenue sharing is tied to your liquor tax, your marijuana tax, cigarette tax, and a portion of hotel tax. And these follow a formula that's based on state statute on how those are allocated, and they are, from my recollection, all of them are based on population size. And so one of the criterias, or there are, correct me if I'm wrong, Kalina, I believe 7 requirements for specific services that a city has to offer, are, I can't remember exactly how many, a certain portion of the 7 services that a city has to offer to be eligible to receive state revenue sharing. Yeah, I believe, yeah, so 4 out of 7. So usually that comes at the council adoption. And we have certified every year that we are eligible to receive state revenue sharing based on performing those required services.
Terrific. Thank you for the explanation. And then when you say levy property taxes in the prior year, that's referring to the permanent property tax rate as opposed to other property taxes that the Budget Committee may approve?
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments regarding state revenue sharing? All right. A motion is required to receive the city's portion of state revenue sharing. Is there a motion to receive $825,500 in state revenue sharing for fiscal year 2025? I will entertain a motion.
Sorry, I move that we receive that.
Kelly Pement makes the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilor Wolf seconds. We have a motion that and a second. Is there any other? Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right. I will conduct a roll call vote. If you are in favor, please say yes. If you are in favor of receiving the city's share for state revenue sharing, please say yes. If you are opposed, please say no. All right. We will start with Leah Voigt.
Yes.
Councilor Wolf.
Yes.
Clarissa Benfield.
Yes.
Councilor Hu.
Yes.
Mayor Lube.
Yes.
Kelly Pement.
Yes.
Jake Schlack. Yes. Councilor Shaw.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The motion is approved unanimously. State revenue sharing is a go. We will now move to the next section of this agenda item, which is to discuss debt service and levy property tax rates. And I will hand it off to Finance Director Kang for that presentation.
So as you know, our permanent property tax rate, as we have mentioned in the in prior conversations, is the $2.515131 per thousand. And that's based on assessed value. And then we have a local option levy rate of 29 cents per thousand. And then the total amount of debt obligations for debt service for the fiscal year 24-25 is the $2,903,000.
Are there any questions or comments regarding the levying of property taxes? If there are no questions, I will entertain a motion to levy the permanent property tax rate of $2.5131 per $1,000 plus an additional 29 cents per $1,000 local option levy property tax, and to levy the debt service for general obligation bonds of $2,903,000. Is there a motion?
I'm happy to make that motion. This time I'm going to be able to say it out loud. I motion that we accept the levy property tax rate as shown above.
Thank you. Did you want to second that?
I will second that.
All right, there's a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion?
The only thing I want to ask is, I know Carol is very specific when we at council make the motion. Are you comfortable with saying the motion of doing that? They're just very,
No,
very picky about the budget. This isn't like other stuff.
That's why I asked. I was like, I'll make the motion if I can have your paper.
Okay,
I think we probably
Yeah.
do need.
Let's go
Let's-
back and be just
let's
very
start. Yeah.
specific with the dollar values and assessed values and all of that, please.
thank you.
Not to panic anyone, it just,
All right, point of order, Councilor Wolf? I said I would entertain a motion. I apologize. All right. I appreciate, that's my first point of order. So Robert Rules of Order studying paid off. All right, let's pause and reset. Kelly, please withdraw your motion as stated, just so that way it's not outstanding.
I withdraw. Do you want me to withdraw this motion and the previous motion?
No, just
Okay.
this motion. I believe the state revenue sharing motion
All right. I
was satisfactory or adequate. I'm looking for teammates for head nods.
So I'd say yes on that. I'd say on this one and future ones, if you read the full thing,
Yeah.
whoever motions can just say so moved. And then you would move what the chair just read.
Perfect.
Under Robert's rules. Yes.
Thank you. All right. Withdraw your original motion.
My original motion, I withdraw my original motion.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to read this again, and then we will redo this. I am entertaining a motion to levy the permanent property tax rate of $2.5131 per $1,000 plus an additional 29 cents per $1,000 local option levy property tax, and to levy the debt service for general obligation bonds of $2,903,000. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All right. If there is no further discussion, I will call a roll call vote. If you are in favor of levying these property tax rates and such, please say yes. If you are opposed, please say no. I will start with Councilor Wolf.
Yes.
All right. Clarissa Benfield.
Yes.
Council President Hu.
Yes.
Mayor Lube.
yes.
Kelly Pement.
Yes.
Jake Schlack votes yes. Counselor Shaw
Yes.
and Leah Voigt.
Yes.
All right, the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Bit of excitement with that last motion. I appreciate you all for your cooperation. All right. I just want to ask our teammates, is there, it looks like there's one more slide that we have before we consider our final two motions. All right. All right, so yeah, these are the big ones. So we will consider two separate motions, one to approve the City of Tigard budget and one to approve the Town Center Development Agency budget. So I will entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2025 City of Tigard budget with budget and technical adjustments as presented earlier, totaling $241,329,023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Counselor Hu motions. Is there a second? Counselor Shaw seconds. All right. Is there any further discussion? Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. I will conduct a roll call vote. If you're in favor of passing the motion as stated, please say yes. If opposed, please say no. And we will start with Clarissa Benfield.
Yes.
Counselor Hu?
Yes.
Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Kelly Pement?
Yes.
Jake Schlack, yes. Counselor Shaw?
Yes.
Leah Voigt?
Yes.
And Counselor Wolf?
Yes.
All right, the motion is passed unanimously. Very exciting. Yeah. All right. So that is the first motion, and then I will entertain a motion to approve the Town Center Development Agency budget for fiscal year 2025 with budget and technical adjustments as presented earlier.
The budget committee is for both, so I don't believe it's the same as the.
Yeah. Yeah, I did at the beginning reconvene both the City of Tigard Budget Committee and Town Center Development Agency Budget Committee. And I do recall last year, I don't recall last year having to adjourn or pause the City of Tigard Budget Committee meeting and then reconvene a separate budget committee meeting for TCTA.
In years before that, we have had to, but so long as someone who knows the rules intimately has reviewed this and approved it, then I trust them.
Budget Officer Steve Reimer, do you have any concerns?
No, I think since we called them both, as Kalina said, also, this is serving both those bodies. The council and TCDA will do that. When we get to the council's part, they will move into the TCDA budget, put on their TCDA hats during that time, but for budget committee, we're fine. I think, if I can, I think when Liz, we used to lay out a little different where we would have a separate entity, but you are the same entity.
Thank you. Valid point. We want to make sure everything is done legally and properly. Is there any further discussion on that point? All right. Well, I will entertain the motion that I stated some moments ago.
Chair Schlack, I'd like to move the motion that you stated.
Thank you.
I second.
All right. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right. If there's no further discussion, I will take a roll call vote to approve the fiscal year 2025 TCDA budget. If you are in favor, please say yes. If you are opposed, please say no. We will start with Counselor Hu.
Yes.
Mayor Lube.
Yes.
Kelly Pement.
Yes.
Jake Schlack votes yes. Counselor Shaw,
Yes.
Leah Voigt,
Yes.
Counselor Wolf,
Yes.
and Clarissa Benfield.
Yes.
All right, the motion is passed unanimously. I'll grab- I did say as adjusted.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the motions that were made? City Manager?
Oh, sorry,
Reimer?
not on the motions that were made.
All right. That's two. We could always motion to undo it or something. I don't know. All right, so those are all the motions. Like I said, that's the main business of this meeting. Want to thank everyone for their time. City Manager Reimer, would you like to make any remarks at this time?
Absolutely. I want to do the same thing. I want to start by thanking Budget Committee, all of you. I think it was a very collaborative process. The great questions that you provided. Thanks to the team for all the follow-up during the meetings, and thanks to the broader team for their efforts leading into the budget. You met many of them the first day on that Saturday here, but there's many other teammates that are involved in this as well. And so just a big thanks to all of them for helping pull together the many, many details that you saw and some of the changes at the end that we were making. So we do appreciate all of you understanding the need to make those technical adjustments at the end as we're trying to reconcile all the different moving parts, as well as some of the things that changed in even that short window of time in those few months since we put out the proposed budget. So with that, thanks again, Chair. Nice job as always. Appreciate your effort in leading a efficient meeting and a clear meeting, which is really helpful, I think, for our standpoint, and hopefully for all of you, where it's a nice paced understanding where we're moving next. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other remarks anyone would like to make before we adjourn the meeting? All right. Well, I want to thank the committee for their community service and their interest in the budget process. It's always great to get together for our few meetings every spring. And just a friendly reminder for anyone that's any members of the public that are watching our broadcast, this is just the end of one portion of the budget process. If you would like to make public comment on the budget, there will be a public hearing coming up in June where before the council considers the formal adoption of the budget. So on the June 18th, you said? On June 18th. So there is still time for your voice to be heard in the budget process before we go into the next fiscal year. If there's nothing else, though, I want to thank everyone, and we will adjourn the City of Tigard Budget Committee meeting at this time. Thank you.